We're going to look at one more way that we can represent a quadratic function using general form or what we call standard form. The rule is right up here. ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to y. The most important part about the formula is that a can never be equal to 0, because if you multiplied 0 times x squared, that term would eliminate, therefore leaving you a linear relationship. These are the types of rules that we started off our quadratic unit on in partners or individually. You had an opportunity to take a rule that was in standard form or general form, plug it into your graphing calculator, and identify some special characteristics. That's when we started to learn about what a vertex was, what an axis of symmetry was, whether or not our parabolas would be opening upward, downward, or if they were narrow or wide. So we had just been spending some time looking at the vertex form, and now I want you to know how you can identify those special characteristics using our general or standard form. So as we look at this kind of question that we have, how do we find those special characteristics? We're going to start off with that axis of symmetry. There is a special formula that we can use. It is x is equal to the opposite of b divided by 2 times a. This formula, to be able to find the axis of symmetry, or that vertical line that divides the parabola into 2 equal parts, or that line of symmetry, is derived from the midpoint formula in geometry. So a midpoint, if you're not sure what that is, it would be 2 endpoints of a line segment, and you would find the exact middle. Middle means midpoint. We're going to use that today, and we're going to start off with example A. So if you look at A, I have x squared minus 14x plus 24 equals y. The first thing that we need to do is identify what's the b and the a. Remember, we're solving for x. That's our axis of symmetry. So I'm going to go ahead and list those out, a, b, and c. And when looking at this, I see that c is 24, so I'm going to go ahead and write that in. I see that the b is negative 14. I know it says minus 14, but it does mean negative 14. But I'm looking for the a right now. I don't see any number there. So remember, it can't be 0, because if I plug 0 in for a, I would have a linear relationship. So this has to be 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and substitute those values, a, b, and c, into the formula to get our axis of symmetry. So I'm going to write x is equal to the opposite of b. So I'm going to write that in here too. When I do the opposite of b, b is already negative 14, so I'm going to go ahead and put that down as a positive 14. And then I'm going to go ahead and do 2 times a. So if I did that 2 times a, that would be 2 times 1, so that would be 2. So if I simplify 14 over 2, then my x value would be 7. That means that the axis of symmetry, someplace on that parabola, the vertex is going to lie when x is equal to 7. Now, we need to know where the vertex is. I have no idea what the y value is, but we know when we evaluate rules, we can find any y value we want to by substituting in any x value. If we know one x value of 7, we can substitute that back into the rule to find out the y. It's almost like if you envision making a small mini table, and if x is equal to 7, you're going to use what you know about substitution to be able to find y. Now, if I was going to do this one, I'm going to set it up. So I'm going to write in a different color just so you can see. Now we're finding the y value for that vertex. I would do this, 7 squared, because my x value is 7. I'm going to do minus 14 times 7, and then I'm going to add 24. Now if I do that, 7 times 7 is 49. If I did this one here, 14 times 7 is 98, which is a negative 98, and then a plus 24. And if I combine all of those together to be able to solve to find out what my y value is, I would get my y value here of negative 25. Now, when I go ahead to do this, I can answer a few of those questions. My axis of symmetry, AOS, is going to be x is equal to 7. My vertex is 7, negative 25. Now we have to identify too, is this going to be a minimum or a maximum? So let's go ahead and take a look at the a. The a in this formula is identical to the a in that vertex form. We have to know what's there. So if I have a 1, that means it's going to be a standard width, and because it's positive, it's going to open upward. So I know that it's going to open upward. I know my vertex right here is going to be 7, negative 25. And we know that our axis of symmetry is going to be x equals 7. Okay, let's take a look at B. Now, if we look at this one, I see A, B, and C already provided. I'm going to go ahead and list those out just so we know what we're going to substitute in. So if A is equal to negative 3, B is equal to negative 6, and then C is equal to 8. Now, I know this does say minus 6, and my leading coefficient here says negative 3x. Let's put those in as negatives because that's what those quantities are. Now, if I'm going to do that axis of symmetry, I'm going to say x is equal to, I'm going to do the opposite of b. So the opposite of b is 6. I'm going to do 2 times a. So if I did 2 times negative 3, that means I'm going to get 6 over negative 6, and my x value is negative 1. That's the axis of symmetry. Now I want to be able to find where my y value is. How high or how low did my parabola go? So I'm going to go ahead and substitute it in. I'm going to do negative 3 times negative 1 squared minus 6 times negative 1 and add 8. Remember, we know how to evaluate a rule with any x value. So we're going to use the x value for the axis of symmetry to be able to find it. So negative 1 squared is 1. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Negative 6 times negative 1 is a positive 6. And then I'm going to put plus 8. When I go ahead and combine all of those together, I would get 11. And that's my y. So let's talk about what we know. Our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. That's, again, that vertical line that's going to divide our parabola into 2 equal parts. My vertex is negative 1, 11. That tells me how low or how high my parabola is going to go. Let's take a look at that A. A is right here, negative 3. Because it is negative, that parabola is going to open up downward, and it's going to have a maximum point. And you're going to notice it says 3. So if I did want to describe whether or not my parabola was wide or narrow, because my A value is 3, I know it's going to be narrow. It's just going to be flipped upside down.